Okay, you all good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast.
You're listening to the B2C Lead Gen Podcast. My name is Daniel Hopewell, here with Simon Delaney, and this is episode 118, Using AI to Boost Lead Value. So we've talked about using AI in lead gen in a general sense before, but today we're going to focus on some more practical applications of it. Simon, can we start this with a sort of a general overview of how AI can be used to improve leads, and maybe also set the context of why we're doing this now and discussing this now?
Yeah, sure. Just as a quick note, I've got a bad cold, man flu or something, not want to grumble, stiff upper lip and all that. So if I sound like I'm underwater or have an even deeper voice than normal, you know why.
Yeah, don't blame my editing.
Yeah. So we've spent, 6 months now with ChatGPT, I think, since the sort of AI explosion happened. I mean, we've been using AI in all sorts of different places or humans have, but in particular, it's been grabbed in sort of marketing and sales with ChatGPT, especially in a massive way. And what's been happening is we've been using it to sort of qualify leads, or people have to some degree. So lead comes in, gets sent off to ChatGPT, that asks it a bunch of questions, and then qualifies the person, gets what they're interested in, whatever else. So that's all been great and it's worked relatively well. But the problem has been that when you're dealing with ChatGPT, you have to send the entire context with every lead of what the scenario is. So you have to tell it how it needs to behave, the constraints it's operating under, who it is, how it needs to respond, the type of persona it needs to take on, what it's actually responding to. You haven't been able to train it on an individual basis. You've just been using the knowledge inherent in ChatGPT to respond to your queries. So it's been good in like a fairly basic way, but because the moment you start speaking with humans in real life, however that is via text, WhatsApp, chatbots, whatever, things quickly get like fairly out of control. So what's changed in the last couple of weeks, literally, is that OpenAI has released assistants and GPTs, and these are almost like individual ChatGPT things that you can train yourself in really specific areas. It will retain all the information that you give it. So you could give it, tables of maths that it needs to respond to people on. So think of like things and financial services where you want to find out the loan that someone could get based on the amount they owe on their mortgage and the repayments per month, whatever. You could put all this into your own GPT. And then when you're having a conversation with a person, this GPT or this assistant can now respond with exactly the information that you've given it. You can train it. You can do absolutely everything up front without having to send the context in the API call that you have to do at the moment. So suddenly this opens up an entirely different world of it becoming more like just a well-trained person in the particular vertical that you're operating in. So that has changed the opportunity. So we've known about ChatGPT and how it's being used for sort of qualifying. We've, messed around testing and things, but it's been a bit like it's not quite there. But with the opportunity assistant and GPTs give, it's changed it completely.
Yeah. So the course of this podcast, I want to sort of dive into the benefits of using it and how people can actually start using it and all that sort of stuff. But just before we do, can we set out some of the big considerations that people might have or should have before they actually begin?
Yeah, sure. So one of them is that GPTs can't be hooked up to APIs currently. I don't know if that will change soon. It sort of changes every day. Outside of enterprise accounts, and people have been waiting months to get enterprise accounts. But Assistant can be used, and you can hook it up via an API. And then it really becomes about training your bot. So you need to give it as much context as you possibly can. For example, get good call scripts, bad call scripts, what each one looks like. Give it the persona that you want it to operate under. Give it all the information about the vertical, your company, the guidelines it needs to operate in, what it should do under X scenario, and any definite responses you want it to give to specific questions, because sometimes you don't want the chatbot to like run off, into a flight of fancy. You want to sort of control the response that it gives. And the other big consideration is you need a human there to basically monitor it. I'm sure, when we're talking about this in like 5, 10, 15 years time, that probably won't be necessary. But right now, I think if the bot starts struggling or there's something happening, you need a person there that can monitor the conversations, and they are able to then step in and take over if the bot actually struggles. So it's similar to having an agent almost at a call center or someone replying, but the difference is that each agent can handle, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 conversations, for example.
I want to come back to that last point shortly, but just first, do you think it's sort of the aim when using this in this context to make the lead believe they're speaking to a real person, or is it more like a case of, obviously I'm an AI, but sort of, I think it's a matter of preference, but like how would you use that? Like, would you try and trick people? I don't want to use the word trick, but make them believe it's a real person, or would you sort of be open about the fact it is AI?
Yeah, I'm almost 100% certain that all the people using this at the moment will be pretending it's a real person. Guaranteed they will, just because the opportunity is too great. So right now in the world we live in, we've all had bad experiences with bots. It's like you ring up your bank, or you start dealing with your bank, or there's some winky wanky bot that you have to interact with. I always struggle with them, right? Like, I don't know if you do, but I just don't like dealing with them. So everybody tends to try and avoid them because they're not particularly great. But I wonder if under this new paradigm, especially with these like assistants that you can train completely in GPTs, whether we'll start to become less conditioned about having to speak to a human to achieve an outcome. And it's just getting to the outcome becomes more and more important, rather than like who's dealing with it. So I would say it's up to the individual who decides to do this, whether they're going to pretend it's a real person or not. But I think it's more of an age that we live in, probably, that makes people believe that they want to speak to a person, because we've become so used to bots being so shit.
Yeah, I think that's the key, actually. Like, from my perspective, I have no issue with talking to a bot, but I have an issue if it goes wrong and it can't help me. That's when I say get me, But in a weird way, I think it might change. Like, it might be quite nice to not have to deal with a human. Like, if they can trust the bot to just be like, I can just do this and not have to sort of like faff about waiting for responses. It'll be a lot faster. And I think it's just like getting to the resolution I want as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. So, you just want to be able to talk naturally, don't you? So it's not like, where you're always having to choose like a binary thing, or have to be really careful about what you're saying. If you could just talk naturally and get the same outcome, no one would be bothered. And this is going to play in the future into all aspects of our lives, probably. They talk in the future. I mean, the thought absolutely terrifies me of aeroplanes being controlled. There's no pilot; it's just flown by a bot, basically. So I think once you get to that scenario, the fact that you're like speaking to a bot of being qualified, you just won't give two shits, because it's the same one that's flying your aeroplane as well. See, I think it's just more to do with that. You actually want to speak to someone because they could just help you quicker. But if the bot can do that anyway, what's it matter?
I'm not sure this is a good time not to ask this question, but what happens then if it all goes wrong? Because like I was going to ask this in relation to the conversation, but not to an absent pilot. But yeah, like how what's the sort of the deal with that? Like, is people listening and want to use it as a method of qualifying the leads? Like, if suddenly the AI starts spouting nonsense or gets stuck or whatever, like how can people protect against that? Or
so this is why you need a person monitoring it currently. So you need a interface that someone can interact with, and they could potentially control 20, 30 conversations, and then there'd be another agent. And these are all going to be like product experts in customer success, potentially in sales, whatever. Depending on who's doing it, it could be a lead generator and monitoring the conversations. And that sort of plays into the aeroplane analogy, right? Which is they're never going to like release AI on an aeroplane. You think of like the drones that fly over wherever they're flying over at the moment, that are doing stuff. They have a level of automation, but they also have someone sat in like some US Army camp who can take over or decide which target to go after. So if you imagine, rather than a pilot potentially being on the plane, they're going to be there to step in and be able to control the plane remotely, should it encounter any errors, which the thought's horrifying. But it's a similar principle, right? You just need a person there who's going to be doing stuff that can step in and take over.
Yeah, I imagine it's sort of a logical end point where, rather than having 100 people in a customer service center or whatever it is, there'll just be like one person, but there'll be 100 conversations going, and there'll just be like one person sort of like almost like a conductor, just making sure everything's going and sort of jumping in, which I think brings us nicely to sort of what we discussed at the start, which is the benefits. I mean, that's kind of, I assume the only reason anyone's listening to this, they want to know how they can benefit from using AI. So how do you see that?
So the benefit, I mean, imagine the benefit of having a bot that can know entirely like the vertical you're operating in, know absolutely everything, know more than you know, probably. You'll be able to train, because like you can only retain a certain amount of information, and you might have to look it up. So this is like, there's a few different scenarios that you can use it, but one of the ways I'm thinking is, imagine you generate, I don't know, a £10 lead. There's a certain level of intent and whatever else. But then by qualifying it, you can take that to a £200 lead and get it to the point of a sale. So you still have the lead at the lower level. And to be able to do that is taken like no time, like anyone's time, apart from one person monitoring it. And it's taken like no costs outside of like a system cost, the interaction costs, however you're going to be having this conversation. So to do that with those leads currently in like let's say a call center or a sales team, you need to hire people. There's an hourly cost to it. There's the training, there's all the other overheads. There's massive HR issues all the time. You don't want to see anyone out of their job or anything, but the reality is this is, if you're a commercial business, this is what you're going to be looking at. This is how you'd replace it. And this is why it's so interesting with like specific bots like GPTs and like Assistant, because they enable you to do this now, whereas ChatGPT hasn't. So all this like talk about it and everything, it's not really been applicable, because it's just been like an imaginary, in the future, this is what we can see happening. But this is like, companies are beginning to jump on this now and starting to think about, how can we utilize this? How can we reduce our costs and whatever? And the other is, you think of the benefit for the person. I mean, most people these days, I mean, not everyone, some people want to talk to people, but a lot of people just want to like get stuff done in their own time. They just want to interact with people in their, their preferred method of communication. And a lot of the time that isn't a phone call with someone. Sometimes it is. So that option always needs to be there, right? But a bot can filter that. You know, do you want me to carry on asking you questions now, or do you want to speak to someone immediately? Or do you want to book a time? I mean, that can all be trained like that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if we're talking like, do you want to purchase now? If you know, it was something that could be purchased over the phone. So if it's like some sort of financial advice or financial services, it could be they have to go to someone, but you can get them to a much greater point of knowledge. But with a sale, I don't know, it's broadband or something, you get them to a point, it's like, okay, do you want to switch now? Do you want to do this over the phone, or do you want a link to use? And suddenly that affiliate link gets associated back to the lead, and, you know, whatever else. So the benefit is like massive. And it sounds horrible. What we've really done is remove the human element, which in a lot of ways was kind of just doing what this is doing anyway. It just knew a bit of knowledge, and in some ways this will know more anyway. But it will still need a human element to control it all.
Yeah. Let's end this by looking at a beginning, and by that I mean, you can imagine people listening to this thinking, right, I'm sold. I want to start using AI to either buy leads, generate leads, whatever, however I want to use it. What can people do to actually start, like in a practical sense? How can they actually begin this?
I mean, it's not entirely simple yet. You have to be like quite a lot of technical knowledge to set this up. But it's probably it's really going to be difficult for me to explain it on here. But if you get in touch, feel free to reach out to me, or you know, just go on LinkedIn or simon@databall.com, and we can run through the sort of best steps to get set up. But yeah, it's relatively simple. It just takes a bit of technical knowledge and know-how to get it all set up.
Cool. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed listening to that and found it interesting, and can begin to think about ways to actually start doing it, and if not now, in the very near future. That was episode 118, using AI to boost lead value.
Thanks for listening to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe to hear more from those at the very cutting edge of the lead gen world.